Would you still love your child if she chose a life you don't understand? That was the question Emily Carter screamed at her parents the night they slammed the door in her face. 7 months pregnant, soaked in rain, heartbroken and shaking, she had no one left. Not a friend, not a home, not even a bed to cry in. Just the tiny life kicking inside her and a backpack full of baby clothes she'd found at a church thrift store. She'd spent her whole life chasing approval, perfect grades, quiet obedience, polite smiles. But the moment she chose life for her baby, they chose to erase her. This isn't just a story about a girl who lost everything. It's about what happened next, the stranger in the suit who offered her a key and asked for nothing in return. It's about the truth behind wealth pride and the wounds that parents leave behind. And if you think you know where this is going, stay, because what Emily discovers behind the gates of a billionaire's estate will shock you and change everything she thought she knew about love, survival, and forgiveness. Emily stood just inside the front door of her parents' modest house in Hudson Valley, clutching a folded sheet of paper in her trembling hands. The sun had barely set, casting long golden shadows across the wooden floorboards she had walked on since childhood. Her mother, Margaret Carter, was stirring a pot in the kitchen, humming an old hymn. Her father, Robert, sat in his armchair reading the local paper, glasses perched on the tip of his nose. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you," Emily said, her voice cracking slightly as she set her purse on the table. Margaret looked up and smiled gently. "What is it, sweetheart?" Robert peered over the top of his glasses, his expression shifting into that expectant seriousness Emily knew all too well. Emily took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding so loudly she could hardly hear her own thoughts. Slowly, she unfolded the paper and held it out with both hands. I'm pregnant." Silence. The kind of silence that isn't quiet at all, but heavy, suffocating. A silence that screams. Margaret's face froze. Her hand stopped mid-motion, the wooden spoon dripping sauce onto the floor. Robert's paper crumpled in his fist as he stood up slowly, like an earthquake preparing to break loose beneath the surface. "What did you just say?" Robert asked, though. His voice made it clear he had heard her the first time. "I'm pregnant, Dad." Emily repeated more softly this time. 7 months. His name is Brandon. We met at college. That's when the storm hit. 7 months, Robert's voice thundered across the room. "You've been hiding this from us for that long." "I didn't mean to," Emily said quickly. "I was scared. But I'm ready now. I have a plan. I'll keep working at the bookstore." "You brought shame into this house," Margaret interrupted, her voice trembling, not with grief but with humiliation. "What will the neighbors say? What will the church say?" Emily looked at her mother with desperate eyes. "Mom, please. I'm still the same person." "No," Robert snapped. "You are not the daughter we raised. The daughter we raised had morals, discipline, respect." "She still does," Emily cried out, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I made a mistake, but this baby is still part of this family." Robert's face turned to stone. He walked to the front door and opened it wide. Cold air poured in. "Then find a new family." Emily froze. "You're kicking me out." Margaret didn't look at her. Her eyes were fixed on the window, watching the light fade beyond the trees. "You can come back," she said, "when you've taken care of the situation." "The situation," Emily whispered, wrapping her arms protectively around her belly. Margaret turned, her voice sharp as a blade. "You should have thought about consequences before you spread your legs for some boy who ran off the second he got what he wanted." Emily gasped like she'd been slapped. Her world crumbled in that moment, not just because of the cruelty, but because it came from the very people who were supposed to catch her when she fell. She didn't remember walking up the stairs or packing the small backpack with trembling fingers. All she could hear were fragments of their argument: downstairs reputation, disgrace, not our daughter anymore. When she came back down, her parents were waiting in the living room. Robert's arms were crossed. Margaret's gaze was fixed on the carpet. "So that's it?" Emily asked. "You're really doing this?" "Don't come back until you've made this right," Robert said coldly. Emily paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "I hope one day when you meet your granddaughter, you realize how wrong you were." "There will be no granddaughter," Margaret said without looking up, "because you will do what's right." Emily stepped out into the night, closed the door quietly, and heard the lock slide shut behind her. Just like that, she was no longer welcome in the house she grew up in. She walked for hours. Every street lamp felt like an interrogation light. Every face she passed felt like judgment. Her feet took her to her best friend's house, desperate for comfort, for anything. But when Chloe Mitchell opened the door, her face was pale. "I'm so sorry," Chloe whispered, eyes red. "My parents already heard. They said you can't stay here. I fought them, but..." Emily nodded. "I get it." And she did. In this town, shame spread faster than wildfire. Pregnancy out of wedlock? It wasn't a mistake, it was a scandal. She walked until she couldn't walk anymore. Her legs gave out near the far edge of Main Street Park, a place she'd played as a child. She found a bench hidden under a willow tree and curled up using her backpack as a pillow. Her coat was thin. The wind sliced through it like knives. And that's when it happened. A shadow moved. Quick footsteps. A figure approached from the dark. Emily tensed her heart in her throat. "Hey," a raspy voice called out. A man staggered toward her, unshaven, reeking of alcohol. "What's a pretty girl like you doing out here all alone?" "Stay back," Emily warned, her hand on her belly. "Relax," he slurred, reaching out. "Just making conversation." When he grabbed her wrist, adrenaline surged. Emily screamed loud and fierce like a lioness guarding her cub. Porch lights flicked on in the distance. A window opened. The man cursed and stumbled off into the shadows. Emily collapsed back onto the bench, shaking. But she had protected herself. She had protected her baby. Later that night, shivering and numb, she stumbled into a tiny church at the corner of the park. An elderly nun found her near the back pew, weeping quietly. The woman wrapped a warm blanket over her shoulders and whispered, "You are not broken. You are not lost. Sometimes the world fails us, but love never should." Emily didn't sleep much, but for a few moments she felt like someone saw her and didn't turn away. As dawn crept into the sky, her eyelids grew heavy. She returned to the bench under the willow tree, curled up once more, and let exhaustion take her. What she didn't know was that within the next few minutes, a man in a dark suit would pass by, and with one glance, he would change everything. We're sorry to pause here, but what do you think Emily should do next? Should she trust a stranger offering help, or keep her guard up and face the world alone? If you feel this story deserves to be heard, please drop a like and tap that heart. Your support means everything. The morning sun stretched its golden fingers across the dew-covered park as birds chirped softly in the distance. It should have been peaceful. But for Emily Carter, waking up stiff and cold on a public bench with swollen ankles and a growling stomach, it felt more like waking from a nightmare, only to find out she was still in it. She blinked through the light, adjusting her eyes when the sound of shoes crunching gravel made her freeze. Instinctively, she gripped the strap of her backpack and wrapped one arm around her belly. A tall man in a tailored charcoal suit had stopped just a few steps from her. His hair was neatly combed back, his jaw clean-shaven, and his expression unreadable. Everything about him screamed money power and the kind of life Emily had never touched. But it was his eyes that surprised her. They weren't cold. They weren't judgmental. They were concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice low and calm. "I saw you here last night. You didn't move." Emily straightened up quickly. "I'm fine," she lied, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Just resting." He glanced down at her belly. Resting. 7 months pregnant on a park bench. She hated the heat that rose to her cheeks. "It's temporary," he nodded slowly. "Name's Nathan Whitmore." That name hit her like a slap. She'd heard it before on the news, on the real estate signs, in conversations she was never part of. The Whitmore family owned buildings, businesses half the valley. This man, he wasn't just rich, he was untouchably rich. "Emily," she muttered, not offering a handshake. She didn't have the energy for pride, but she still had enough to keep her guard up. Nathan studied her a moment longer, then said, "I have a guest house, clean, private, and empty, and I need someone to keep it organized. Deliveries, repairs, basic management stuff. Nothing heavy. You'd have your own key, your own space." Emily squinted. "You're offering me a job and a place to stay. I'm offering you a lifeline," he said simply. Her throat tightened. It sounded too good to be true. "And from a stranger, a man, you don't even know me," she said. "I could be anyone." "Maybe," he replied, but you're someone who slept in a park instead of knocking on a shelter's door. That tells me you're careful. That tells me you still have pride." She didn't know what to say to that. Then he added, "And I've been where you are, believe it or not. Not the pregnancy part, obviously, but broke. Alone, sleeping on couches, watching my little brother die because we couldn't afford his surgery." That last part hit her like a punch to the chest. Emily looked away. The walls she'd built up since last night were trembling. "I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's work, real paid work. You'll get a paycheck, healthcare, and your dignity." Still, she hesitated, because accepting meant trusting, and trust had failed her again and again. But then a cramp hit her side. Not dangerous, just a strong reminder that she couldn't keep pretending she was fine. What if you expect something more later?" she whispered. Nathan didn't flinch. "Miss Carter," he said carefully, "this is not a favor with strings. You are free to leave at any time. You are not obligated to me in any way." For the first time, Emily saw not just wealth, but decency, and that more than the money or the house or the title made her whisper, "Can I see it first?" He smiled. Of course. Minutes later, she was sitting in the back of a sleek black sedan, unsure how her life had pivoted so fast. The driver, Jim Porter, greeted her with the kindness of someone who'd seen pain before. No judgment, no pity. They drove through the quiet side of town where the sidewalks were wider, the lawns greener, and the world seemed slower. Emily stared out the window, half afraid she'd wake up again and find it all a dream. When they pulled into the long driveway of the Whitmore estate, her breath caught. It wasn't just a mansion, it looked like something out of a movie. Polished stone, manicured hedges, fountains that danced in the morning light. But Nathan guided her past all that down a quiet stone path behind the main house. "This is it," he said, unlocking a smaller white cottage with ivy climbing its walls. Inside, Emily found a warm, sunlit living room, a fully stocked kitchen, a cozy bedroom, and a bathroom that felt like it belonged in a luxury hotel. She walked slowly, hand trailing across the granite countertops like she couldn't quite believe it was real. I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Say you'll take it," Nathan replied. So she did. The first night she slept in the guest house, it took hours for her body to relax. She lay there, eyes on the ceiling, listening to the silence. No traffic, no shouting, no cold. She touched her belly and whispered, "Maybe we've been given a second chance." But doubt lingered. Why her? Why would a man like Nathan care? She didn't have to wait long for the answer. The next afternoon, Nathan returned from work early. He found her organizing the pantry, something he hadn't even asked her to do. "You don't stop, do you?" he asked with a soft smile. "I like feeling useful," she replied. He grew quiet for a moment, then said, "There's something else I'd like to offer you. Full medical coverage. A good obstetrician. You shouldn't have to worry about that now." Emily froze. She'd been ignoring that reality, pretending she could afford it, but the truth was she couldn't. Her voice broke. "Why are you doing this?" Nathan stepped closer, but not too close. "Because someone once gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it. And because when I saw you on that bench, I saw myself. Years ago. Tired. Broken. Fighting to keep going." He paused. "And because I think you're stronger than you even realize." Just then her phone buzzed. She looked down. Brandon Walker. She stared at the screen, heart racing. She hadn't spoken to him since the day she was kicked out. Her fingers trembled as she answered. "Brandon," she said softly. His voice was cool, distant. "I've been thinking. You still have time to do the right thing. End this. Save both our lives from a mistake." Emily's hand clenched the phone so tightly it hurt. "A mistake, Emily? You're alone. I can't raise a kid right now. And you're living off some stranger? Come on!" The tears came instantly, hot and silent. Nathan, watching from the doorway, started to step away, but Emily raised her hand. She didn't want to hide anymore. "No, Brandon," she said clearly. "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She hung up, slowly lowered the phone, and for the first time in days, she smiled. It wasn't joy, it was power. We hate to stop here, but tell us, if you were Emily, would you have trusted Nathan? Or would you have walked away, even if it meant sleeping on that bench again? If this story moved you, please like and tap the heart. Your support means everything to this journey. Emily never thought her world could change so quickly again. It had been just over 2 months since she first arrived at Nathan Whitmore's estate, broken, scared, alone. Now her belly was rounder, her smile brighter, and for the first time in her adult life, she was sleeping without nightmares. The guest house had become more than shelter. It had become her sanctuary. But healing wasn't just physical. The scars her parents left, the rejection, the silence, the disbelief still throbbed under the surface. That's why when James Porter, Nathan's loyal driver, came into the guest house one rainy afternoon, with hesitation in his voice, Emily's stomach twisted before he even spoke. "There's a woman at the front gate," he said gently. "Says her name is Margaret Carter. She's your mother." Emily froze. She hadn't heard from her parents in nearly 3 months. Not a call, not a text, not even a note. "What does she want?" Emily asked, barely above a whisper. James looked at her with quiet compassion. "She looks desperate." The next 5 minutes felt like a dream. Emily stood in the grand living room of the main house, her arms resting on her belly for comfort. When Margaret walked in, drenched from the rain, hair matted to her forehead, she looked nothing like the woman who had thrown her out. She looked small and shaken. "Emily," her voice cracked, seeing the obvious changes in her daughter. "You look so far along." "I'm due in 6 weeks," Emily said, stiff but steady. There was silence. Then Margaret stepped forward a little. "Your father, he's sick. They found something in his heart. He needs surgery, but we don't have the money." There it was. Not a greeting, not an apology, a request. Emily's chest tightened. "So you came for help, not for me, not for the baby, but for a check." Margaret's eyes brimmed with tears. "I know how it sounds. I know we failed you, and we don't deserve anything. But please, he's your father." Emily nearly laughed, not from amusement, but from pain so sharp it had to escape somewhere. "My father disowned me, told me to fix the situation and never come back." "I regret every word," Margaret whispered. "We were afraid. We thought we were protecting our name, our image. We thought you thought wrong." Emily cut in. "You thought being respected was more important than being loving." At that moment, Nathan stepped into the room. Dressed in a crisp white shirt sleeves, rolled up, his calm presence instantly filled the space. He looked from Margaret to Emily, then back again. "I'll cover the surgery," he said simply. Margaret turned to him, stunned. "But why?" Nathan's gaze never left her. "Not for you, but because no child should live with the guilt of letting a parent die. Emily doesn't need another burden." Margaret broke down then, sobbing as she sank into the couch. Emily watched her once proud mother crumbling, and something inside her softened. Later, when they were alone, Emily turned to Nathan. "You didn't have to do that, I know," he replied, "but I didn't do it for them, I did it for you." His voice was quiet, but full of something she'd grown to recognize: truth. Weeks passed. The tension with her parents eased slowly, like the thaw of winter frost. They visited carefully, at first bringing homemade soup and baby blankets. Margaret apologized again. Robert, still recovering from surgery, took longer to speak, but one afternoon he looked at Emily and simply said, "I was wrong." That was all she needed, and then it happened. It was a Sunday morning when Emily felt the first contraction. Sharp, real, not a practice cramp. Nathan rushed her to the hospital while holding her hand so tightly she swore he lost feeling in his fingers. Hours passed. Pain grew. But every time she screamed or cried, Nathan was there, whispering, "You've got this," promising, "I'm not going anywhere." When Lily was born, Emily didn't cry, not right away. She was too stunned by the overwhelming love that crashed over her. But when Nathan held the tiny, wrinkled, perfect little girl and whispered, "Hi, baby girl, I'm Daddy," that's when the tears came. Because for the first time in her life, Emily didn't feel alone. She felt complete. 2 months later, under the blooming cherry trees in Nathan's backyard, Emily stood barefoot in a simple white dress with Lily cradled in her arms. Friends gathered. Her parents, now changed, stood beside James, Dr. Helen Brooks, and a few of Nathan's colleagues who had become more like family. Nathan looked at Emily with eyes full of everything she never thought she deserved: commitment, admiration, love. And when the officiant said, "You may now kiss your bride," Lily giggled between them. Their wedding kiss was soft, but the promise behind it was unshakable. Not a promise of perfection, but of choosing each other over and over again. Later that evening, as the house grew quiet, Emily sat on the porch holding Lily, watching Nathan chase bubbles through the garden. She looked at her daughter's face, round cheeks, curious eyes, and whispered, "Do you know what kind of miracle you are?" Because Lily wasn't just the beginning of a new life. She was the proof that love could grow from pain, that family could be chosen, that being abandoned didn't mean you were unworthy, only that some people didn't know how to love you right, but someone else would. Nathan joined them, wrapping an arm around Emily's shoulder. "You look like someone who's finally home," he said softly. She smiled. "That's because I am." And as the stars lit up the sky, Emily realized that the worst day of her life, the day she was thrown out, judged, discarded, had been the beginning of something greater. Because sometimes when everything burns to the ground, you don't rebuild the old. You build something better, something stronger, something called family. Before you go, if you were in Emily's shoes, could you forgive the people who once turned their back on you? And what do you think, can someone you barely know end up saving your whole world? So, what did you think of Emily's journey if it touched your heart? Comment no. 3. If you feel it needs work, comment no. 1. If it was just okay, comment no. 2. Let us know what country you're watching from, and don't forget to like, share, and tap that heart to support more stories like this one.